Chapter 1. The dust of slavery, the ash of stars. Listen, and do not breathe too deeply, for the air of this memory is coarse with ash. These are not the tales written in Jedi scrolls, nor whispered by Sith lords grown vain with power. These are the forgotten echoes, the grain in the blood of galaxies. The story begins not in the height of temples, nor in the black of starships, but in the low hum of heat on sand, where suns burn without mercy, and time dies without mourning. Tatoone. A name spat from the mouth of fate, beneath its twin suns. The sky forgets to soften, and the soil forgets to care. There among rusted scrap and buzzing flies lived a child, not born, but willed into being, Anakin, slave, son of none, dreamer in the dirt. His mother Shmi spoke no man's name as father, only that he came from the Force. Her voice trembled not in confusion, but in quiet fear, for the Force does not give gifts without price, and when it dreams, the galaxy trembles. The boy's hands were scarred from metal, his mind sharp as a vibroblade. He built from ruined droids' pods, engines shaping order, from junk with a focus unnatural for a child. His heart was too large for his chest. He raced for coin, scraped for breath, but never ceased to dream of stars. The Force moved around him like a tide held barely at bay. No Jedi touched him, no temple trained him, and still it knew him. For every 1,000 children touched by the Force, only one becomes a storm. And he was the storm. He spoke to machines, as others speak to beasts. He bled compassion for strangers and fury for cruelty. In the dark of night, beneath the hum of Watto's workshop, his eyes stared at constellations, unblinking, feeling them, knowing he belonged somewhere higher than sand and chain. He was the galaxy's secret buried beneath bantha bone and engine grease. But all secrets scream, eventually, and far above him, the dark had already turned its gaze. The Sith, long thought extinct, moved in silence. Dachisigios, cloaked in democracy, robed in lies, had begun his long design, a game of shadows played in centuries. But he did not yet see the boy. He did not yet hear the wind howl with the child's name. The Jedi would arrive first, not to rescue, not to save, but to test. Qui-Gon, Jin Master of Disobedience, servant of living Force, was drawn not by choice, but by fate. A broken hyperdrive brought him to Tatooine, but prophecy kept him there. He felt the tremor the moment he saw the child. Not a ripple, a rending. He asked questions. The boy answered without fear. He spoke of building C-3PO, of pad racing against grown beings, of dreams where he flew without ships. Qui-Gon saw the impossible. The Force screamed through the child like thunder through silence. And yet, the Council would not listen. They saw the darkness like cracks beneath a glass temple. Fear, possessiveness, wild hope. The boy was too old, too angry, too dangerous. But Qui-Gon, as ever, defied. He named the child the chosen one, the one who would bring balance to the Force. The prophecy, half lost and half feared, stirred from the grave of memory. Anakin Skywalker left the sand, but the sand never left him. He said goodbye to his mother. With a hug too short, a whisper too brave, and already pain took root. For every wound begins not with betrayal, but with distance, with leaving someone behind. The galaxy would mark his journey from slave to knight, but it would forget the most sacred truth. He was first, and always, a son. The stars did not welcome him. The Jedi Temple greeted him with cold wonder. The younglings looked upon him not as brother, but as stranger. Obi-Wan Kenobi, newly knighted, accepted the role of teacher with reluctance. Duty, not desire, made him master. And yet, in that reluctant bond, destiny found its second thread. The Force is not a line. It is a knot, and the knot had begun to tighten. Anakin's dreams grew louder. Not visions, but invasions. Fire, screams. A mother's voice crying through walls of stone. He did not speak of them. The Jedi warned against attachment, but the heart does not obey warnings. The boy smiled when spoken to, obeyed when instructed. But somewhere behind his eyes a storm gathered, and in the deepest chambers of Coruscant, the Sith finally heard his name. Darth Sidious smiled, a boy born of no father, a boy already dreaming of death, a boy who could become anything, including him. You ask now, how can a child born of slavery become a tyrant dressed in black? The answer is not sudden, it is sand, clinging to skin long after the wind stops blowing, and it begins here. With a boy, a whisper, and a prophecy too old to trust. Would you hear more? Would you follow this sorrow deeper? Then listen. For the next echo awaits. Chapter 2. The phantom threshold of the Jedi come closer. Do you feel it? The silence between heartbeats, the breath held at the edge of truth. That is where the Jedi temple begins, not in marble nor in light, but in the silence between certainties. And it was into this silence that the boy walked, barefoot in the soul, wrapped in prophecy, unwelcomed by the very order meant to shepherd him. Anakin Skywalker entered the temple like a shadow made flesh, small in body, vast in destiny, and yet they did not kneel for him. They did not sing for him. They questioned. The High Council, perched upon thrones of detachment, looked down with eyes polished by centuries of caution. Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, they measured him, not by spirit, but by danger. They saw the boy's flame and feared the fire, not the cold he had already endured. Too old, they said, too afraid. They spoke of his fear as if it were weakness. But fear, unspoken, does not fade, it ferments. Qui-Gon Jinn stood alone, voice echoing across tradition like a heretic in a temple of ghosts. The chosen one, the prophecy speaks of, this boy may be. But the council had long since buried the prophecy beneath years of war and ritual. Balance, what Jedi truly desired. That, for balance, meant darkness must rise to meet the light. And so the boy was denied, not by decree, but by silence. Still, destiny, like the Force, does not wait for permission. It moves through cracks. Death came swiftly. Qui-Gon fell on Naboo's soil, pierced by the red blade of Darth Maul, Sith. Reborn, hatred incarnate. The Jedi had believed the Sith extinct, but now the illusion was torn. The ancient enemy had returned, and in the final breath of the Maverick Master, a dying request was made. Train him, Obi-Wan. He is the chosen one. And so it was done, not by belief, but by oath. Obi-Wan Kenobi, bound by love and loss, accepted a burden that was not his to bear. He had not chosen the boy, but he could not refuse the promise. Anakin was now Jedi, but not truly. The halls of the temple echoed with teachings that grated against his soul, control, detachment, stillness. But how could he be still when visions of his mother's pain clawed at his dreams? How could he let go of attachment when love was all he had ever clung to? He learned the code by mouth, but not by heart. And the code, though sacred, was not infallible in hidden chambers, ancient. Holocrons whispered of balance not as peace, but as tension. The Jedi had forgotten this, but the Force had not, and it was watching him. Anakin's presence burned through every meditation circle like a solar flare. He excelled in saber forms, mastered mechanics, surpassed initiates who had trained since infancy. The masters praised his skills, but feared his instincts. He felt everything too deeply. He cared too much. And they mistook this depth for danger. They built walls around him, thinking to protect. But walls do not cradle. They isolate, and in the dark, something else watched. Not Jedi, not light, but Palpatine. He had already taken root. Senator, Chancellor, friend, the man wore many masks, all of them warm. To Anakin, he offered time, praise, understanding. He did not speak of the Force only, of trust, of greatness, of how proud he was. In a galaxy of half-truths and restrictions, Palpatine gave the boy what no one else did, permission to feel. And so, brick by brick, a path was laid, not with red sabers, not with rage, but with subtle words, gentle nods, encouragements carefully, placed like venom in a chalice. Still, Anakin did not fall. Not yet. He trained, fought, bled, protected. His friendship with Obi-Wan grew strong, forged in battles and brotherhood. And yet, Obi-Wan was never Qui-Gon. He loved Anakin, but did not understand him. Their bond was forged of fire and duty, not destiny, and destiny would not wait. In the shadow of the temple, the Clone Wars crept ever closer. Darkness stirred. In the Senate, armies were being shaped in secret. On Camino, beneath rain-slicked skies, soldiers were born without choice, bred for obedience. And across the stars, the Sith deepened their grip. But for Anakin, it was love that first made the ground quake. Padma Amidala, Senator, Queen, Mirror, their eyes had met again after years apart, and with that gaze, every rule he had swallowed unraveled. The Jedi warned against attachment, but the Force did not. It stirred around them, within them. Love, forbidden and bright, became his sanctuary. He hid it from the Jedi, but not from the Force, never from the Force. And in the Force, love cannot hide. You may wonder, why did they not see? Why did they not stop it? But the Jedi had grown blind. Their temple was tall, but their sight was narrow. Their code preserved their order, but not the soul. And the soul of the Force was beginning to scream. Anakin Skywalker stood at the phantom threshold. Not fully Jedi, not yet Sith, balanced for now on a blade of prophecy. The galaxy would not remain still, and neither would he. Would you dare to look further, to see the slow unraveling of empires wrapped in robes of peace? Then come, the war has not yet begun, but already. The blood remembers. Chapter 3, The War Before the War. Listen, and you will feel it, not the roar of battle, not yet, but the trembling beneath the stone. For before every war, there is a silence that forgets itself, a stillness so deep it believes the storm will never come. This is that silence. The Republic still breathed, though its lungs were choked with decay. Senators postured in marble halls, their words full of light but hollow with rot. The Jedi, cloaked in tradition, served as generals before the battle had even begun. And somewhere in the deepest current of the Force, a voice waited. A voice that had waited for 1,000 years. Darth Sidious. He wore no mask now, only smiles. A chancellor beloved by all, his hands held no weapons, only promises, but his soul. His soul was a serpent wrapped in prophecy, and the galaxy slumbered in his coils. Anakin Skywalker, barely more than a boy, stood now at the edge of his youth. Padawan to Obi-Wan, hero in training, and though the halls of the Jedi Temple echoed with sacred chants and meditations, the Force around him whispered in pain. Visions plagued his sleep, flashes of darkness, rivers of fire, screams without faces. He spoke of them to no one. The Jedi taught detachment, and so he detached. From truth, Palpatine, ever watchful, ever patient, began to lean closer. He spoke to Anakin not as a leader, but as a confidant. He asked of his dreams. He flattered his instincts. He planted seeds in the soil of the boy's soul. You see danger where others see peace. You know what they do not. You feel what they are too afraid to feel. And Anakin, hungry for understanding, began to believe. The council praised his growth, but they feared his pace. They whispered behind closed doors, "He is too powerful, too driven, too much like him." And the phantom of a Sith, once thought gone, the ghost of Darth Revan, of Malachor, of Bane hung like smoke in their memory. But the Sith were not gone. They had simply changed shape. Count Dooku, fallen Jedi turned Sith apprentice, moved now. In shadowed corridors, he sowed dissent, whispered of secession, gathered worlds like stones to hurl against the Republic. And none knew that he served Sidious. The war had not begun, but the players were already on the board. The pieces already stained in prophecy, and still, the Jedi did not see. They watched the Senate collapse under its own weight. They watched star systems fall into conflict, but they clung to tradition, to a code written for a galaxy that no longer existed. And Anakin, caught between obedience and instinct, began to fracture. He saved lives with boldness that bordered on defiance. He disobeyed when rules slowed him down. He questioned where others bowed. And in every act, the Force pulsed louder in him. Podum watched from afar. Their bond, though hidden, deepened with every mission. She saw not the anger, only the compassion. She mistook the storm for a sunrise, and the Jedi mistook it for arrogance. They were not wrong to fear, but they feared too late, for the clone army was already built. In the rain-swept laboratories of Camino, millions of soldiers born not from love, but from command stood ready, commissioned by a name none could trace, approved by a council long dead, and awaiting a signal no Jedi understood. When Obi-Wan uncovered the army's existence, the Order was stunned. Yet rather than question the deeper truth, they took command. They sat in chambers of light and accepted tools of war made in secret. They became generals in a battle they had not started, and thus the trap was sprung. The Clone Wars began not with a scream, but with applause, and Anakin, barely grown, was thrust into command. No longer merely Padawan, he was a symbol, a hope, a weapon. He led battalions through shattered cities, walked among corpses, and called it peace. He told himself it was justice. But inside, the line blurred. He saw innocence caught in fire. He saw enemies who did not deserve death. He saw Jedi give orders that cost thousands, and he began to wonder if the code was made for war at all. In the dark of war, love was his only sanctuary. He and Padme married in secret beneath the gaze of Naboo's lakes. No guests, no blessings, only stars and silence. It was a union born not in joy, but in desperation, for they both knew the truth. Peace would never return, and they would never be free. Anakin, Jedi by name, husband by heart, soldier by duty, began to drift between masks, and the Force, ancient and cold, took no sides. It watched, it recorded, and in the shadows, Sidious smiled. The pieces moved faster now. The boy who was slave had become knight. The knight who was dreamer had become general, and the general who was husband would soon become destroyer, not because he was evil, but because he believed, and belief, untethered from truth, is the sharpest blade of all. Would you see how belief becomes betrayal? Would you witness the love that burns the galaxy, then follow? For the storm has only just begun. Chapter 4. Shadows that follow the chosen one. The war spread like fire across dry grass, but not all burns are made by flame. Some scars are carved by prophecy, and some by the whispering weight of what might be. Anakin Skywalker, Jedi General, husband in secret, slayer of foes, hero of holovids, carried more than a saber into battle. He carried shadows. They clung to him, not as enemies, but as memories too loud to silence. For even as the Republic cheered his victories, the boy who once dreamed beneath Tatooine's suns still wept in silence. He had left his mother behind. In chains, and chains, like echoes, never break cleanly. Shmi Skywalker. Her voice began to haunt him. Not in guilt, but in pain. The dreams returned. She was calling to him from far away, screaming through darkness, trapped, dying, each night. Her cries carved themselves deeper into his chest, and each morning he rose in silence, untouched, unseen, unraveling. He pleaded for help from the council. They urged patience, detachment. They offered teachings in place of mercy, but the Force did not teach. It demanded, and so Anakin went against orders, beyond protocol. Tatooine, back to the dust, back to the silence that knew his name. He found her. Too late, her body broken, her life stolen by the Tusken Raiders, her last breath spent whispering his name. Something inside him shattered, not in rage, in grief so total that the dark rose to fill the hollow. He slaughtered the tribe, not just the men. He told Padma the truth, and she did not run. She held him, and in her arms, the shadow inside him found something to cling to. Not redemption, not healing, but permission. From that day forward, his power deepened, not because he was stronger, but because he was wounded. The Jedi did not see this. They saw only his success, victories on Christophsis, tactical brilliance on Cato, bold courage that won battles others would have lost. But none asked what it was costing him. Only Obi-Wan watched with wary eyes. Brother, teacher, friend, he loved Anakin as few ever did. But he did not understand him. He could not. Obi-Wan followed the code. Anakin followed his heart, and the heart is a treacherous teacher. The war demanded more, and more was asked of Anakin than any knight before him. He was called the hero with no fear. But he did fear. He feared loss. He feared abandonment. He feared the emptiness that crept behind every goodbye. And so he held tighter to Padma, tighter to the idea of control, tighter to power that might stop time, reverse death, defy the laws of Jedi and cosmos alike. It was not ambition that grew in him. It was terror, but terror is a quiet thing. It wears the face of love. It speaks in the voice of protection, and it listens most to whispers that promise salvation. Palpatine fed those whispers well. He praised Anakin at every turn. He counseled him in private. He spoke of politics as war, and war as necessary balance, and then subtle, gentle, treacherous he began to speak of the Force, not as the Jedi saw it, but as power without chains. Anakin listened. He did not yet believe, but he listened, and all the while the council grew more wary. They felt the darkness rising, but not from Sidious. From Anakin they sensed the storm, but they looked at the clouds, not the source, and so they distanced themselves. They denied him mastery. They questioned his judgment. They praised him in reports, but held him at arm's length in truth. He who had given everything to their cause, he who had bled and broken and burned for them, he who they still feared would fall. Their caution became prophecy, for what is more dangerous than a soul that no longer trusts its keepers? Podman felt it too. She watched her husband grow distant, not in affection, but in thought. His eyes wandered in silence. He stared into space for long moments, jaw clenched as if holding back a scream. She spoke to him gently, asked what haunted him. He lied, to protect her. But in the Force, truth always finds a way through. And now, new dreams began. Podmen dying, screaming, in childbirth, and Anakin again, powerless to stop it. He begged the Jedi for help again. They offered teachings. He needed hope. They gave doctrine, and the shadow within him smiled. In some dark place, the Sith stirred. The boy was breaking, not from corruption, not from anger, but from love. The chosen one's path had twisted again, not by hate, but by the unbearable weight of caring too much. The fall had not begun in fire. It had begun in tears. You wonder now, was there still time? Could the tide have turned, perhaps? But tides obey gravity, and Anakin's gravity was pulling him toward a fate sealed long before he was born. Would you see where prophecy leads when it is devoured by fear? Then follow, for the next chapter opens not with light, but with war. Chapter 5. The blood moon of Geonosis. Whispers fall heavy now, soaked in rust and shadow, for we have arrived at the scarlet dusk where innocence was dismembered beneath the twin moons of Geonosis. Hear this, dreamer of death and destiny. The blade was not drawn in rage. Not yet. It was drawn in loyalty, in sorrow, in sacrifice. But blood cannot be offered to the void without the void stirring in return. Anakin Skywalker stood not as a child, not yet a man, but as a weapon. In waiting, he came to Geonosis, not by command of the Council, but by the pull of his heart. The voice of Padme Amidala, crying across the stars. Her peril was his breaking point, and so he descended, alongside Obi-Wan, into the ancient, sand-choked catacombs of the Separatist cradle. Geonosis was old before the Republic drew its first breath. Beneath its surface festered hive means and dark machines, and deeper still, buried in the bedrock of time, lingered Sith whispers like fossils in amber. It was not just a battlefield, it was a womb of war. Here, Dooku waited, not merely as a fallen Jedi, but as a prophet of unraveling, an architect of the oncoming storm. The Jedi came in legions, their robes flowing like silent requiems across the red dust. Lightsabers blazed to life like prayers of denial. But the Force did not sing, it screamed. In the execution arena, Anakin stood before beasts and battle droids. Padme at his side, Obi-Wan beside him, and for a moment, this triad of destiny shone like a constellation, bound in fire and purpose. but constellations fall, when the sky cracked open with the arrival of Yoda and the clone army. It was not salvation, it was the first trumpet of apocalypse. The grand army of the Republic, bred in secrecy, obedient to a shadow, swept across the sands like a flood. The Jedi, deceived, believed themselves generals. But generals of what war? Soldiers of what prophecy? And in the chaos, Skywalker's rage simmered, tested. He dueled Dooku, not with discipline, but fury. Obi-Wan fell wounded again, always wounded, and Anakin leaped to face the Count with both sabers drawn. A flare of brilliance and pain, of promise and arrogance. But Dooku, old serpent that he was, severed Anakin's arm with ease, as if pruning a vine that grew too wild. The boy collapsed, bleeding not only from flesh, but from certainty. And it was here, in agony, in shame, in failure, that Anakin's soul split. Just slightly, a seed, planted, not by Dooku, but by fate. For loss became familiar. Loss became fuel. Dooku escaped, guided by Darth Sidious's unseen hand, and the war began. The Clone Wars, a conflict engineered by Sith, led by Jedi, and suffered by billions. A war not for peace, but for transformation. The Jedi were no longer keepers of the peace. They were warriors now. That was their undoing. In a quiet chamber, aboard a medical cruiser, Padme held Anakin's remaining hand. He winced not from pain, but from change. His mechanical limb, the first scar of the dark future, was cold and efficient, a mirror of the very droids he fought. He was becoming something else, even then. And yet, he smiled for her, and she, blind to the prophecy, smiled back. So ended the blood moon of Geonosis, not with triumph, but with transition. The boy was fading. The war was only beginning. And the Force, vast and indifferent, recorded each heartbeat in the void. But listen closely. There are things born in war that do not die in peace, and Anakin Skywalker was no longer walking toward peace. He was walking toward a throne of fire. Chapter 6. The wound of mortality. He was the Jedi who should not have died, and yet must. He was the man who feared death, not for himself, but for the one he loved more than life. Anakin Skywalker, whose soul was forged in fire and bound by love, now stood on the edge of eternity, able to save the one thing that still tethered him to the light. Whispers moved like shadows between the temple walls. The Force, once his guide, had grown quiet. It watched him now. It tested him. In his dreams, Padme lay dying, not in battle, not by sword or assassin's hand, but by the will of fate. A silent suffocation, a cruel prophecy. Each vision came, not as metaphor, but as a certainty, a funeral scene before the death. Her hands trembling, her lips pale, calling out for him in vain. He woke gasping, again and again. There was no healing the kind of fear that grew in him. Jedi were trained to let go, but he was not like them. He never was. And now he cursed the weakness they called wisdom. The Jedi preached detachment while they vanished into ancient archives, blind to the coming storm. But Anakin saw it. He saw her death every night, and each morning the fear clung tighter. It was in this wounded state that he returned to the Council. War raged still, though victories mounted. Grievous had been hunted across the stars. The Clone Wars neared their end. And yet the Jedi, deeply entrenched in bureaucracy and secrets, did not trust the one they called their chosen one. They refused him mastery. They placed him on the council, but denied him the title of master. A decision small in appearance, but immense in meaning. The insult cut deeper than they knew. He who had led armies, he who had saved worlds, he who had stood against Sith assassins and separatist traitors alike, now told he was unworthy. His pride bled. But beneath that pride lay something worse, the fear of losing her, the slow panic that he was running out of time. And then came the voice, soft at first, draped in silk and patience. Chancellor Palpatine, long trusted, long admired, now stepped forward as something more, not just a mentor, not just a friend, but a guide with forbidden knowledge. The Sith were not extinct. No, they had evolved, hidden within politics, disguised as protectors. And now Palpatine revealed a truth that split the air like thunder. The power to save Padme's life existed, but it was not within the Jedi. It was not in their dusty teachings. It was in the dark side. The legend of Darth Plagueis whispered through the Chancellor's lips like a serpent's hispliguis, the wise who could bend life and cheat death. A myth to the Jedi, a lie to the Council, but to Anakin it was salvation. It was the answer his dreams demanded. He did not run, he listened, and in that listening the fracture widened. He began to turn inward, even as war pulled him outward. He hid his thoughts from Obi-Wan. He walked the halls of the temple not as a brother, but as a stranger cloaked in doubt. He watched the Jedi as if for the first time, seeing only hypocrisy, control, and coldness. They spied on the Chancellor. Now, they asked him, Anakin, to do it, to betray a man who had never doubted him, who spoke to him with warmth, who offered him a way out of his nightmare. The force around him grew cloudy. It no longer sang with clarity. It pulsed with contradiction, uncertainty, dread, as if it too was struggling to decide who he was, or who he might become. Pad noticed it, in their brief stolen moments. She looked at him with eyes wide, not just with love, but with worry. He was distant, consumed. She asked him what troubled him, but he could not tell her. How could he? How could he speak of Sith legends and forbidden power? How could he describe the agony of watching her die each night in his mind? And so he lied, or worse, he stayed silent. She held him, and he clung to her as a drowning man grips driftwood. But he could feel it. She was slipping through his fingers, and Palpatine's words circled him like a moon of fire. The Jedi do not trust you. They never have, but I do. They would let her die, but I would not. A wound had opened, not of flesh, but of fate. A wound that bled into every choice, every breath, every heartbeat. The Jedi had failed to see it. They taught him to be a weapon, but never how to heal. They taught him to fight, but never how to grieve, and the wound festered. A moment would come soon and seen, but inevitable, when that wound would rupture, when love would become fear, and fear would become desperation. And in desperation, Anakin Skywalker would reach for power not granted by the light. The Force held its breath. The galaxy turned toward its doom. And the wound, though still unseen by many, had already begun to poison the soul of the Chosen One. Chapter 7. The chains beneath the cloak hand. So the mask was born, not of metal alone, but of torment. An alchemy of pain and fire and obedience. The boy who once gazed at the stars now stared into them from within a prison of black, where breath came only by the mercy of machines, and the sound of his own existence echoed like thunder in a tomb. The Jedi Temple had fallen. Coruscant smoldered. The galaxy wept in silence. But Anakin Skywalker, once the storm of light, no longer answered to that name. He was now only Vader, In the shadows of the Mustafarian cataclysm, Sidious had gathered the pieces of his broken apprentice and sculpted them anew, not to restore the man, but to bury him. The transformation was not healing, but binding. Every cybernetic limb, every breath's synthesized hiss, was a shackle. The lava had not killed Anakin Skywalker. It had preserved him in agony, and Sidious laughed. Not outwardly, no. His was the smile of the grave, patient and absolute. He had found not a servant, but a symbol, a creature of fear, a walking cathedral of ruin. Vader would be his herald to a galaxy slipping quietly into obedience. The cloning chambers of Bizzus stirred with life. Imperial governors knelt before the rising banner of Palpatine's regime. Across the void, the Jedi survivors hid like ghosts in the roots of forgotten worlds. But none would speak of hope, only of Vader. He hunted not with fury, but with precision. Not like the Jedi general he once was, aflame with righteous anger. No, Vader moved like a spectre through the stars. Every mission a funeral rite, every victim a whisper silenced. He did not feel, not in ways the living understood. His grief was a sea, frozen beneath armor. His guilt a wound that would not close, yet no longer bled. Only Sidious, who held the key to his suffering, could touch the tether of his soul. And in the night, when stars fell quiet, there were dreams, but they were not his own. In the silence between breaths, he heard Padme's voice distorted, fading, reaching across time like a hand through fire. He saw her lying in death, her lips still shaped around his name, though no sound remained. He saw Obi-Wan not as enemy, but as brother, mourning the shadow he had failed to save. Vader would awaken from these echoes, not with sorrow, but with fury. A cold, directionless rage that scorched all reason. He would lash out at the empty halls of his star. Destroyer at the trembling officers. At the very walls of his cell. But none dared speak of it. None dared look upon him longer than necessary. He was not man. He was myth, rumor, omen. The Emperor's right hand draped in blackened avatar of inevitability. There were whispers in the outer rim of a few Jedi who had survived the purge. Master Shakti fleeing into dreams. Quinlan Vos vanished into the jungle. Yoda, the green flame, who had vanished into mist. Obi-Wan, no one knew but Vader. He searched. Across star systems, through blood and wreckage, he searched. Not merely to kill, not merely to obey, but to prove something only he understood, that Anakin was truly gone, that there was no light left to return to. He built his castle on Mustafar, not as a sanctuary, but as an altar, a monument to the moment of his death. The lava still glowed below, the same fires that had eaten him, reshaped him. There, the dark side whispered to him more clearly than even Sidious could. In those black halls, experiments in Sith alchemy were conducted. Ancient texts drawn from Malachor and Moraband were studied. He sought the secrets of life, not to preserve it, but to dominate it, not to save Padme, but to defy the Force itself, which had betrayed him. He had once been the chosen one. Now he was the broken one, and yet the prophecy remained. Twisted, forgotten, buried, the Force had not abandoned him. It waited, watching. For prophecy is not a line, but a spiral. A song played through many instruments, and in the silence between Vader's dreams, in the quiet hush of hyperspace, where only his breathing remained, something flickered, a voice not yet born, a presence not yet revealed. The future was not finished with him. not yet, not yet. Chapter 8. The Iron Womb of Mustafalistan. Now, listener of shadows, the air still scorched with the scent of fire and treachery. For here, in the blood-veined belly of Mustafar, was Anakin Skywalker. Unmade, and Vader truly born, the world groaned with volcanic fury, its crust ever weeping molten tears. This was no accident. Mustafar had long been chosen by dark designs, a planet attuned to suffering and soaked in ancient Sith blood. Long ago, the dark side marked this place as a wound in the galaxy, a locus of torment, where the Force churned in agony, and to this inferno was Anakin summoned, not as a warrior, but as an executioner. By this point, Anakin, no longer wholly Jedi, not yet fully Sith, had drowned the Jedi Temple in death. The screams of the younglings still echoed in the corners of his fractured soul. He had bowed. To Darth Sidious pledged himself as Vader, yet still bore the name of Skywalker upon his tongue. That name would be burned away here. Padme Amidala, heartbroken and trembling with the weight of betrayal, pursued him to Mustafar. She came not with judgment, but with pleading. With her travelled Obi-Wan Kenobi, hidden in silence, a shadow wrapped in sorrow. When Anakin first saw her ship land, a flicker of the old life stirred within him, a phantom heartbeat. She stepped forward with love in her eyes, her voice soaked in tears. But he heard only accusation. He saw only treason. The dark side twisted her love into imagined betrayal. When Obi-Wan emerged from the ship's mouth like a phantom of Anakin's conscience, the fire was lit. "You turned her against me," Vader snarled, voice already inhuman, already fractured. "You have done that yourself." Obi-Wan whispered the last whisper of a brother's love. Thus began the duel that broke time, not merely a clash of blades, but of destinies, of prophecies rewritten in flame. They fought like gods fallen into myth, darting across cables above lava, screaming through the dark. Blade met blade with the weight of betrayal. Master and apprentice, brother and brother, hope and despair. Obi-Wan did not fight to kill him. He fought to save what remained, but what remained had already been consumed. "I see through the lies of the Jedi," Vader bellowed as red fire cracked the sky. "I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire." And so the Jedi dream died with every word from his lips. But there came a moment, a final moment, where Anakin Skywalker stood upon higher ground, blade raised in rage, and Obi-Wan stood below. "Don't try it," the Master whispered, but rage does not listen. And Anakin leapt blade high, hope shattered into destiny's teeth. Obi-Wan's blade found him. In a blink of blue light, the boy who once dreamt of saving all was cut down by the one who loved him most. His legs gone, his arm gone, his flesh kissed by fire. And as Anakin writhed on the black sand, the lava creeping toward him, he screamed with hatred. "I hate you," he roared, eyes yellow, voice broken. And Obi-Wan, he did not scream, he did not weep. He only whispered what truth remained. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." Then he left, not because he wanted to, but because he could not bear to finish what he had begun. The Force held its breath. Anakin was left to die alone, burning, weeping tears that turned to steam upon his cheeks. But death did not come, for death was denied him. Darth Sidious arrived, cloaked in shadows, and with him came the surgeons of pain, the masks of resurrection, and the tools of Sith alchemy. Piece by piece, the broken man was lifted into the air. Limbs were replaced with iron, flesh fused with machine. Screams were silenced by The last breath of Anakin Skywalker was sealed beneath a black helm, and when the shell was complete, when the monster stood, he asked only one question: "Where is Padme?" Sidious, with wicked glee, answered, "In your anger, you killed her." Silence followed, not peace, not grief, just silence, and then the scream. A howl so deep, so soul-rending, it cracked the Force. The sound echoed across time, across space, across the very bones of Jedi and Sith alike. Darth Vader had risen, but not as a man, as a prison, a soul locked in steel, a prophecy drowned in blood, and the galaxy, in that terrible moment, felt the breath of its doom. The stars themselves wept. Mustafar, the womb of fire, had birthed the Emperor's weapon, and the last light of the Chosen One was swallowed. But listen closer, Seeker, for not all flames die when smothered. Some go silent, waiting, waiting to burn again. Chapter 9. The Maw of the Machine Godden. So the flesh surrendered to fire, and the fire surrendered to the will of the dark side. He was no longer Anakin. He was no longer man. What crawled from the agony of blackened soil was a god of pain, veiled in armor, wrapped in breathless servitude to the mechanical lungs that rasped within his chest. The husk that had once loved, once laughed, once wept, now hissed with every breath, fed not by the Force's light, but by the fury that churned beneath its stolen skin. The soul was still there, somewhere, but it was buried beneath ash and iron. The transformation was not sacred. It was sacrilege in the sterile, humming void of the Imperial laboratory. Dark-robed surgeons enacted a rite of preservation, not salvation. Palpatine stood silent, arms folded, watching the ritual as if overseeing a funeral for the man he had murdered, and a birth for the weapon he had forged. Piece by piece, the armor became the tomb. Limbs of blackened durasteel grafted to cauterized. Stumps, a helmet, cold and insectile, clamped down upon the burned skull. Wires fed into spine and nerve, bypassing sensation in favor of control. Nothing was left untouched. Even the voice was altered. No longer human, but a mechanical echo, like a scream trapped forever in a sealed chamber. And when the mask was sealed, he awoke. The chamber hissed open. The mechanical throne lifted his body upright, and his first act in this new birth, was denial. With a hollow, shattering groan, he asked after Padme. The Emperor lied, as all Sith do, and told him that in his anger he had killed her. The scream that followed was not human. It cracked the walls of the chamber. It echoed through the Force, like a bell tolling across eternity. Vader had been born, not by design, but by grief. Not as a triumph, but as a curse. He would stalk the stars as a revenant of rage. Every breath drawn through that mask a torment. Every step forward a retreat from who he had once been. There were no dreams now, only memories, decayed and twisted. By the dark side, the galaxy would not know him as Anakin Skywalker, the child of prophecy. It would know him as something far worse, the fist of the Empire, the executioner of Jedi, the hunter of hope, the maw of the machine god. His body, broken as it was, became the perfect vessel for terror, for he could no longer be bargained with, could no longer be reached. He did not hunger for peace. He did not thirst for freedom. He had only one craving: obedience. Palpatine had shaped him into the blade that would cut down the last remnants of the Republic, and like all blades, he was not meant to feel. only to serve. But even now, beneath layers of steel and command, there were embers, dreams that bled through in fitful sleep, a lake on Naboo, a smile in the dark, a name whispered by a ghost Padma. The suit could suppress pain, but not memory. The mask could hide the face, but not the soul. And so the galaxy came to fear the shape of the armor, not knowing that within it resided a prison. The monster they saw was real, but the man inside was still screaming. He was sent to the outer rim, to the remains of Warzunts, to the shattered temples of the Jedi. One by one, he hunted the survivors. The clone troopers, now programmed and loyal, followed his command, yet even they looked upon him with unease, for his presence was not simply cold. It was haunted. Darth Vader became myth before he became man again. Children whispered stories of his shadow falling across villages before an entire city vanished. Rebel cells spoke his name like a curse. Jedi survivors knew to flee before his arrival, and those who stayed behind never left alive. But there were whispers in the Force, a murmur that traveled across time, that Vader was not whole, that within the armor something still stirred, not loyalty, not redemption, but memory, a pressure, a question, a rot in the center of the blade, for the prophecy had not yet been fulfilled, balance had not been achieved. The chosen one had not brought peace, only silence, and so the Force waited. It watched, it whispered, not to Vader, but to others. Seeds were planted in the dark. A twin sun rose over a desert world. A child laughed beneath an aging moisture vaporator, and far across the stars the Force exhaled, ... and prepared for what must come, because even the mightiest machine must one day crack, and even the blackest mask must one day be removed, and when it is, what shall be found beneath? A god, a ghost, or the last breath of a man who once believed in light? Let us now descend deeper, for terror was not the end. Redemption was not yet born. The wheel turns, and the eye of the storm has not yet opened. Chapter 10. The Iron Temple and the wound beneath the mask. Listen now, and hear the breath echo through the crypt of iron and silence. The temple is not stone, nor flesh, nor light. It is machine, eternal and unsleeping. A black citadel of pain and command forged from the shattered remains of Mustafar, where fire kissed the soul of Anakin Skywalker and left only cinders. Was here, beneath the molten skies, that the Dark Lord raised his sanctum, not a palace of triumph, but a tomb. Fortress Vader. Its walls were sculpted by Sith alchemy and Imperial labor, built atop ancient dark-side nexuses older than the wars of Jedi and Sith. The ground itself wept pain, and the spirits of long-dead beings howled beneath the obsidian stone. Every corridor a conduit of suffering, every chamber a memory not of glory but of regret. Vader did not build this place to rule, he built it to remember. In this citadel of haunted echoes, he wandered alone when not summoned to the Emperor's will. The galaxy trembled before his approach, but here there was only stillness, and the sound of his breath, deep, mechanical, endless. A bell of mourning for what he once was. The Force here did not sing. It whispered and recoiled, as if even it feared what he had become. And within this fortress, he sought communion with death, not the death of enemies, but the death of Padme. He did not accept her passing, not in truth, though his hands had wrung the life from her, his soul refused to bury her. Thus he returned to this place of pain, drawn like a dark star around the memory of her voice, her tears, her warmth. He hoped there remained a path, however cursed, to restore what he had lost, so he sought forbidden knowledge. He summoned Mustafa's ancient powers. He bent time and space in ritual. He built chambers of meditation where the veil between life and death thinned, where voices from the other side could almost be heard. Ancient Sith once spoke of the Virgent's gated door between worlds. Vader wished to open it. He constructed the gate deep in the lowest caverns of the citadel, fueled by crystals bathed in blood and molten ore. And when the Force trembled and the ritual began, he entered the chamber clad in armor and desperation. But the Force is not a servant, it is a mirror, and what Vader saw on the other side was not her but himself. Not the boy who raced pods under twin suns, not the lover who whispered vows on Naboo, but the monster that had risen from fire, the thing that could never be forgiven. His every wound bared, his soul, no longer hidden by mask or machine, was seen in fuller storm of rage, sorrow, and unyielding shame. The spirits mocked him. The gate cracked, the ritual failed, and Vader screamed. Not from pain, from memory. The Emperor had promised him power enough to stop death. But that promise was a leash, and Vader knew it now. The gate could never be opened through obedience, only through truth. But truth required the one thing he had buried beneath armor and title, Anakin Skywalker. And so, in the silence after the storm, Vader wandered the halls of his temple like a ghost in his own house. His servants feared him. The droids obeyed without question, but none could see the slow fracture forming beneath the mask. He no longer killed out of fury. He killed because it was expected, because it was all that remained. The Force around him grew colder. Mustafa's winds howled louder and deep in his sanctum. He began to dream of her more often. Not just Padme, but the child, the one he had never met. Luke, there was a stirring. In the currents of fate, a ripple he could not name. A name whispered to him in sleep. A light, not extinguished, but hidden. And though he did not yet understand, the darkness within him began to crack not with light, but with longing for what had been, for what might still be. And so the Iron Temple stood, not as a throne, but as a wound, a scar on the galaxy, a scar within the Force, a scar within him, and through it all, the breathing continued, unchanged, unstoppable, unending, but in the void between breaths, silence was beginning to speak, and the Force was beginning to listen. Chapter 11. The shattered sanctuary of Mustafar whisper now into the embers of memory, where heat meets silence, and flame becomes the language of betrayal. For on the volcanic world of Mustafar, the chosen one once boy, now shadow, was anointed in ash, and the sanctuary he believed would be his empire became the furnace of his undoing. Anakin Skywalker, no longer bound by the name, walked into this crucible as Darth Vader. Yet his heart, swollen with delusion, still beat for one thing: control, not of the galaxy alone, but of love itself. For he believed vainly, blindly, that Padme Amidala, his starlit anchor, would understand, that she would join him, that she would bow before his twisted mercy and kneel at the altar of his power. The lava did not crackle louder than his desire. He had killed the separatist leaders in cold, mechanical precision. Dooku's legacy was erased. Sidious's instructions fulfilled. With every strike of his saber, he had buried the last remnant of Jedi hesitation. There, in the conference chambers of Mustafar, He painted walls with treason, and echoed the Sith who came before him. It was not mercy, it was ritual. But mercy had not left the galaxy. It came in the form of her Podmes ship, landed in firelight. Her breath trembled with hope still. Her voice reached for the boy, the man, the Jedi beneath the Sith armor. But Anakin's eyes had long turned the color of ruin. When she pleaded with him to come await, to leave the madness, to let the Republic go, he heard treason in her care. He saw rejection behind her tears. In his fractured mind, she was conspiring with Obi-Wan, and betrayal, once imagined, became real. And so he raised his hand, the Force bent to his wrath, and Podmes' breath was stolen mid-scream. He did not strike her with a saber, no, he crushed her spirit with the very power he once promised would save her. It was the moment the prophecy screamed. Then the Master arrived. Cloaked in memory, wielding sorrow, Obi-Wan Kenobi emerged from the ship and beheld the horror. His brother, the boy he trained, the man he called friend, stood wreathed in flame, eyes yellow with hunger. And between them lay the crumpled form of Padme. There are duels that are battles of power. This was not such a duel. This was grief made into movement, betrayal forged into form. It was thunder on steel, ash in the lungs, tears drawn from the Force itself. They danced upon the edge of hell. Lightsabers clashed, but so too did destiny and regret. Anakin screamed that he hated Obi-Wan, but in truth, he hated the mirror the Jedi held up to him, revealing what he had become. The high ground became myth. A single strike, precise and final, severed not just limbs, but legacy. Anakin fell, screaming in agony as fire consumed his body. Not just burned, but purified, as a dark god is baptized in torment. Obi-Wan could not finish it. He turned, broken, and left the remains of Skywalker to die among the rivers of flame. And as Mustafar roared, Padme gave birth far from the fire, whispering with her final breath that there was still good in him. And thus, the sanctuary of power Anakin had claimed became the tomb of his name, the cradle of Darth Vader's machine birth. The prophecy did not break, it fractured, and where clarity once stood, now remained only shadow. Listen closely now, for the tale is not yet done. For there are places in the Force where screams echo forever, where machines breathe in pain, and where a Sith Lord rises from Ashnot as man, but as monster. Chapter 12. The mask that could not weep beneath the obsidian vaults of Mustafar, where fire weeps like the stars once did for the fall of angels. The figure of Vader stood motionless, cloaked in black, silent save for the mechanized breath that had become his heartbeat. Here, amid ash and ruin, the echo of Anakin Skywalker was buried further with every moment. And the mask, oh the mask, sealed not only his face, but the mourning soul beneath. He had become more than a warrior, more than a servant. He was the warden of despair, the enforcer of a galaxy's silence. Across system after system, his silhouette preceded death. The Jedi who had escaped Order 66 now whispered of him as if he were a curse, not a man, not a Sith, but a shadow with no name. None could fathom the void behind his gaze. But what the galaxy did not see was the silence behind the silence, in private quarters aboard the Executor, in moments between conquest and command. Vader stood before the stars, the same stars he had once raced past as a child of Tatooine, and felt nothing. Not rage, not sorrow, not clarity, for to feel was to awaken the echo of Anakin, and that echo was forbidden. And yet, echoes persist. Visions haunted the dark, not dreams, for dreams require sleep, and Vader had not truly slept in years. They were phantoms, ancient memories slithering through the cracks of his will. The sound of Padme's voice, faint as falling ash. The image of Obi-Wan's final scream. The laughter of a boy long dead. He would crush these visions with the Force, shatter consoles and rip walls apart in his chamber. But still they returned like moths to the void of his soul. On the world of Gorse, he hunted a surviving Jedi, named Terran Malicos. The battle was brief. Malicos, once wise and compassionate, had grown bitter and mad. His mind was frayed by exile and grief, and in Vader's arrival, he saw a reflection, not of the man he once knew, but of what he might have become. "You wear the armor of power," Malicos whispered as he knelt, broken. "But I see you, Skywalker." That name, spoken aloud. A tremor in the Force. Vader lifted him without a word and crushed his body against a stone wall. Bones cracked. Breath ceased. But the voice echoed still, not in the air. But within Skywalker, the Dark Lord returned to the Emperor in silence, always in silence. The galaxy believed he served willingly, that he was the second half of Sidious's will. But what lay between them was not loyalty. It was deeper, darker, a binding of failure, prophecy, and possession. Vader was not free. He was tethered, a creature created by lies and sustained by them. On Coruscant, in the labyrinthine vaults below the Senate, he descended alone into the Emperor's sanctum, a place of relics and dark texts, long hidden from the eyes of mortals. Palpatine summoned him not for counsel, but to show him something. A holocron, ancient beyond reckoning. Sith notations etched in obsidian. It showed him a ritual, a way to sever the tether to identity, to truly erase Anakin forever. But it required sacrifice beyond death. It required the destruction of any remaining memory, any image, any name, any sound that still reminded the soul of who it once was. "Are you ready?" Palpatine hissed. Vader said nothing. The Force churned within him, coiling like a storm that had no sky to unleash itself upon. He took the holocron. He returned to his chamber. He gazed once more at the stars, and for the first time in years, his mechanical hand trembled. He began the ritual. First, he destroyed the last surviving holorecording of Padme's funeral. Then, the Jedi braid he had kept hidden, a relic of childhood, now burned. He cast the hilt of his old saber into the fires of a dying star. With every loss, a scream rose within. But the mask did not weep. The final step required the memory itself, the conscious choice to forget, to erase even the love that had birthed his. Fall, and he tried. He screamed beneath the helmet, a guttural sound swallowed by machines. He clawed at the Force as if to rip it open. But some truths do not fade, some scars do not close, and so the ritual failed. The holocron cracked, not from misuse, but from resistance. The soul it sought to extinguish refused. Vader fell to his knees, not as a man in agony, but as a creature that could no longer die. He rose hours later, or was it days? Time no longer obeyed in the dark, and he walked again as the galaxy's enforcer. But inside the armor, beneath the steel lungs and black armor, Anakin still whispered, not in rebellion, not in hope, but in mourning, for the mask could not weep. And so the Force grew heavier around him, like a cloak woven from ancient sins. And, far across the stars, a boy named Luke stared at the same sky, unaware that destiny was beginning to stir. The shadows, ever patient, would now begin to unravel. Chapter 13. The silence of the mask. The thunder of the past, and so the galaxy turned, as it always did. Yet with every breath it took, it turned. Beneath the shadow of a mask, Darth Vader, no longer the boy, no longer the man, but something else moved, like prophecy fulfilled. The face of the Republic was ash. The dream of the Jedi lay in ruin. And behind the mask of black iron, silence reigned. But silence is not absence. It is the womb of echoes. He walked among the stars, commander of the executor, arbiter of the Empire's will. His presence was a death knell. Systems that once flew banners of rebellion fell quiet at the sound of his approach. Entire sectors whispered legends of the Dark Enforcer who served the Emperor, a creature born of fire, lightning, and betrayal. Yet none knew the truth. None saw the dreams that still haunted the shattered mind beneath that breathless rasp. Visions of Mustafar, of her Padme reaching for him across smoke, of Obi-Wan's burning eyes, of blue lightsabers, and the ghost of a child crying in chains. The pain had not left. It had been ritualized. Every breath through the respirator was a penance. Every movement in his cybernetic shell a reminder of what had been lost. He had traded freedom for power, and yet he was enslaved again, this time by metal, by memory, and by the Emperor's endless, hollow voice echoing in his mind like a sickness. Palpatine's instructions came not as orders, but as revelations wrapped in praise. My friend, my son in the dark side, they fear you because they should. And Vader bowed, not from respect, but from absence. He had no path but forward, no identity but that which had been forged in fire. He hunted Jedi survivors with a mercilessness born not of hatred, but of guilt. The survivors were mirrors, and he shattered them one by one, unable to look into their faces and see who he once was. The purge was not merely obedience, it was a ritual of self-erasure, and still, the Force whispered, it whispered through the cracks in his armor, through the dreams that slipped past sedation, through the distant hum of another lightsaber. Not blue, not green, but unfamiliar. He did not yet know the name Luke Skywalker, but the Force did. It coiled around that name like a serpent sensing heat. Something had awakened. Somewhere in the galaxy, a flame flickered where there should have only been ash. Rebellion gathered in the shadows, not just of politics, but of spirit, and the old prophecies, once scattered, once scorned, began to tremble again. The chosen one, the balance, the returned Vader, in his solitude, could not name these things, but he felt them in his meditations aboard the Executor, alone in a chamber of silence where even the hum of the stars seemed reverent. He reached through the dark side to make sense of the tremors, and the Force, twisted and bound to his will, gave him only riddles. The Son of Sons, the one who walks where you could not. He will ask what you could never answer. In his meditation, he saw a boy with eyes like his own, a face shaped by love and fire. The Force coiled around the child like a cradle and a blade, and Vader, for the first time in years, felt fear, not for his life, but for what that child meant. He knew what the Emperor would do if the child were found, and somewhere within him, beneath the rot and rust of rage, something else stirred. Not hope, not yet, but memory, of a time when he had tried to hide a child, protect a secret. When he believed in the sanctuary of love, he pushed the vision away. There was no sanctuary now. There was only the hunt, the throne, and the shadow of his own making. The boy was a tremor in the current. and tremors, no matter how small, had to be silenced. And so Vader returned to war. His campaigns were thunderous. He extinguished insurrections like candle flames. He tore through space in silence, his presence more terrifying than fleets. And yet, no matter how many were subdued, no matter how many Jedi perished beneath his saber, the whisperer of the Force returned. He is coming. He walks beyond your reach. He carries the blood of stars in dreams. Vader began to descend again, always. To Mustafar, always to that moment. And each time, Obi-Wan turned not to fight, but to walk away. Each time, Padme's face appeared not in agony, but in sorrow. And behind them, in the background of these visions, the figure of a child stood watching. Not Luke, not Leia, but Anakin himself, as he once was, and the child said nothing, only stared, not with judgment, but with grief. It was a wound that would not close. The Emperor did not speak of the tremors in the Force. Not yet. He watched. He waited. He smiled his serpent smile. For he too felt the shifting tides. And unlike Vader, he had planned for them. But Vader, slave of fate, warden of silence, could only stare at the stars and wonder what ghosts now walked among them. The galaxy whispered of hope. He could not yet kill what he could not see. But the prophecy had begun to breathe again, and somewhere a Skywalker was dreaming. Chapter 14. The fires below must be feddened, so the galaxy burn not from without, but from within. For what had once been a republic of light had become a chamber of echoes, screaming beneath the weight of its own hypocrisy. The Jedi were gone, scattered ash upon the stars, and in their place a new order arose, not noble, not just, but orderly, terrifyingly orderly. This chapter unfolds in the darkened chambers of the Empire's rise, where the smoke of Mustafar never ceased to rise within the soul of the man now named Vader, with the Jedi Temple reduced to silence, and democracy replaced by thunderous applause. The Sith did not merely seize power, they buried truth beneath the granite of fear. But within Vader, the fire had not settled. It demanded more. He was the Emperor's blade, yes, but also his broken mirror. In secret, he hunted down the remnants of his past, not only Jedi survivors, but whispers of Padme, of Obi-Wan, of what he once believed himself to be. Each mission to extinguish survivors only deepened the cracks within his armor, for the Force would not forget. It pulled on him like gravity from the grave. We see Vader enter ancient catacombs beneath the shattered world of Malachor, where lost Sith holocrons bled red light through the stone. There, he communes with ancient warlords, with spirits long perished but not silenced. They speak not in comfort, but in riddles, voices that ask, was your sacrifice for peace, or for silence? Haunted by visions of his mother, his wife, and his own reflection as a boy on Tatooine, Vader grows more unrecognizable even to himself. The more he kills, the more his soul frays. He stalks Jedi like a wraith, but behind his rage lies something colder, an emptiness so vast the galaxy could not fill it. Aboard the Executor, his dreadnought of war, he begins to modify his armor not only for efficiency, but for isolation. The chambers grow darker, the systems more precise. No light is permitted to breach his sanctuary. Meditation becomes a communion not with peace, but with pain. It is in this sacred suffering that he believes he grows stronger, but in truth, it is where the Force begins to twist. The Emperor watches this unraveling with glee, for it is not enough that the apprentice be powerful, he must be empty. And Vader, unaware, drifts further from destiny and closer to ruin. It is whispered that during this era, Vader encountered the cult of the Annihilated Ones, dark acolytes, who worshipped not the Force, but the absence of it. They spoke of a void beneath the Force, a hunger that devoured stars and stripped meaning from existence. These heresies, far from repelling him, intrigued him. For if meaning could be severed, then so could memory. He returns to Mustafar once more, not to scream, but to build. Here, among obsidian rivers and molten grief, he orders the construction of a black fortress, not as a palace, but as a wound carved into the planet. This is not a home. It is a tomb in which to bury what little remains of Anakin Skywalker in the lowest chamber of this fortress. Beneath the lake of fire, he places a single relic, Podmes, Japer, snippet. The token once carved in innocence now rests beside cursed Kyber and broken holocrons. Here, he does not weep. He does not pray. He waits, and in his waiting he forgets. But the Force does not forget. Not the cries of the younglings, not the dreams of the Chosen One, not the heartbeat of a boy who once gazed at twin suns and believed in freedom. The fire still burns, but now it is buried, and the fires below must be fed. Chapter 15. The Shadows, Silence, and the Emperors. Whispering the blackened void where stars dare not shine. Vader's breath is the only sound that persists, a mechanical rhythm beating through the endless dark. The Emperor's shadow looms over him, vast and patient, whispering serpentine promises of power and dominion. Yet beneath the armor, beneath the mask that has become both prison and weapon, the last embers of a fractured soul flicker uneasily. Vader walks the line between annihilation and remembrance, a wraith shaped by loss and forged in fire. The Emperor's voice is constant, a dirge that both commands and comforts, binding Vader's will as tightly as the cold steel encasing his flesh. He is the instrument of an empire built on fear, a scourge that silences rebellion before it can ignite. Yet even as he executes his master's will with relentless precision, the cracks deepen invisible fissures in the foundation of darkness. Whispers haunt the void, echoes of a past life, memories stained with love and betrayal. The voices of Padme, Obi-Wan, and the boy who once dreamed beneath twin suns reach him in fleeting moments, fleeting and unbearable. These ghosts of the past stir a tempest beneath the mask, one that no amount of Sith alchemy can still dot in. His solitude aboard the Executor, Vader's mind drifts to the child unknown, the son whispered of in the currents of the Force. The prophecy's fulfillment hangs not only on destruction, but on a hope he cannot name. The galaxy's fate turns not on the Emperor's schemes alone, but on the fragile thread of that child's destiny. Palpatine watches with cold calculation, knowing that the apprentice's turmoil is both a threat and a tool. His plans weave, ever deeper, seeking to snuff out that last flicker of light before it can blaze into rebellion. But the Force is older than the Sith. It bends, it twists, it waits, and beneath the mask, the last spark of Anakin Skywalker flickers, not yet extinguished, not yet ready to be reclaimed. The silence of the shadow is profound, yet even shadows are cast by light, and so the wheel turns, ever onward, toward the dawn of reckoning. Chapter 16. The gathering storm of the forgotten sun in the vast silence between stars, where light is swallowed by shadow, a new presence stirs a child born beneath the twin suns of Tatooine, untouched by the iron grasp that binds Vader's breath. The galaxy, scarred and trembling, begins to pulse with the faint heartbeat of hope. This is the forgotten son, whose name is whispered only in the hidden currents of the Force. Luke Skywalker. He grows in exile, unaware of the destiny etched in his blood, untouched by the Empire's iron fist, but carried on the winds of prophecy. The Force hums softly around him, ancient and watchful, as if holding its breath for the moment when light will pierce the darkness. Far from the iron prisons of Mustafar, where Vader's soul wrestles with memories and machines, Luke dreams beneath starlit skies, innocent, unburdened, yet marked by a legacy he cannot yet comprehend. His life is simple, but the Force has chosen him to be the fulcrum upon which fate will pivot. Meanwhile, Vader's shadow stretches across the galaxy, crushing rebellion and silencing dissent. Yet the whisper of the boy grows louder in the Force, a tremor that unsettles even the Emperor's dark designs. The child is the key to balance, the axis of a prophecy long spoken but never fully understood. In his fortress of solitude, Vader senses the stirrings. Visions invade his mind, flashes of a blue lightsaber, the warmth of a brother's hand, the echo of a name. The armor grows heavier with each passing day, as if the machine itself resists the fragile thread that connects him to the son he has never seen. The Emperor's plans unfold like a dark web, seeking to ensnare both master and apprentice in a final game of power and deceit. Yet fate is not so easily commanded. The Force breathes between worlds, shifting and turning like a restless tide. The boy grows, the shadow waits, and the stars watch silently as the balance teeters on the edge of dawn. Chapter 17. The first flicker of rebellion across the galaxies. Darkened skies, the oppressive hand of the Empire cast long shadows, unyielding and suffocating. But within the silence of desolation, a spark kindled a flicker, fragile yet persistent. From hidden enclaves and whispered gatherings, the murmurs of rebellion stirred like distant thunder, promising the return of light. In the forgotten corners of the outer rim, fugitives and outcasts gathered, drawn by the faint pulse of hope that whispered through the Force. They were not soldiers yet, nor heroes, but seeds scattered in the fertile soil of oppression. Their hearts beat with quiet defiance, their eyes turned toward the stars with yearning. Meanwhile, Vader, enshrouded in his armor of torment, moved relentlessly through this galaxy of shadows. His every command was law, his presence dread incarnate. Yet, beneath the mechanical breath and masked visage, the echoes of a fractured past lingered, haunting his dreams, twisting his resolve. In his meditation chambers aboard the Executor, visions danced before him, a child's laughter, a sister's courage, the faces of those lost and loved. They wove themselves into a tapestry of grief and purpose, binding him in a web of duty and doubt. The Emperor watched from his throne of darkness, weaving his plots with cold precision. He sensed the shifting currents, the fragile hope that threatened his dominion. To him, the rebellion was but an annoyance of flicker, to be extinguished before it grew into flame. Yet fate is a tempest no one commands. The Force, ancient and eternal, flowed through these fragile souls. It stirred the forgotten echoes within Vader's heart and whispered of redemption yet to come. And as the stars held their breath, the first embers of revolution glowed softly, heralding a reckoning written in the blood of past and future. Chapter 18. The dawn beyond the darkness. In the vast tapestry of the cosmos, where light and shadow entwine in endless dance, the final threads of a broken destiny begin to weave toward their reckoning. The galaxy trembles at the cusp of change, the ancient prophecies stirring anew within the currents of the Force. Darth Vader, The Enforcer, clad in obsidian armor and bound by chains of regret, stands at the precipice. The weight of his sins, the echoes of a past life, and the relentless grip of the dark side converge within his solar crucible of torment and choice. Across distant stars, the rebellion grows, no longer a flicker, but a rising flame. The boy from Tatooine, Luke Skywalker, journeys toward his fate, unaware that the path ahead is shadowed by his father's legacy and the Emperor's wrath. Within the silent sanctuaries of the Force, ancient voices whisper of balance, of a cycle nearing its close. The Chosen One's promise is neither fulfilled nor broken, but transformed. The light will not conquer darkness by denial, but through understanding. Vader's breath, once a mechanical dirge, falters as memories of love, loss, and hope surge forth. Beneath the mask, a man wrestles with the god he became and the child he once was. The final confrontation awaits not merely of saber and shadow, but of redemption and fate. As the stars align and destinies collide, the Force watches patient and eternal. The end is but a beginning, and in the silence beyond the darkness, a new dawn breaks. This completes the sacred telling of the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. Darth Vader, the fall, the reign, and the redemption whispered through the ages,